Thank you for joining this webcast hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm Rob Glenn, Vice President of Global Resilience at the Foundation, and I'll facilitate the discussion today. We're here to provide an update on the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. On February 24th, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, and the situation has impacted people of Ukraine, Europe, and the world. Since then, tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes, either within Ukraine or to neighboring countries. People living in the affected areas have limited access to basic necessities, and the conflict has disrupted trade and commerce. Many people have lost their jobs or seen their livelihoods affected. Fighting has damaged infrastructure, buildings, roads, bridges, and power grids, making it difficult for people to access essential services. The conflict has taken a toll on the mental health of those affected, particularly children and vulnerable populations. This webcast is a time to not only honor the resolve and resilience of the Ukrainian people and leaders against this aggression, but it's also the time to share with you ongoing humanitarian needs as this conflict continues. As we recently witnessed President Biden's visit to Kyiv and the discussions in Munich, the global community remains fixed on offering support to this ongoing situation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Marjorie Chorlins, Senior Vice President, European Affairs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. She will help set the stage for our time today. Marjorie, over to you.
Rob, thanks very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Marjorie Chorlins. I'm the Senior Vice President for Europe at the U.S. Chamber. I did have the good fortune to accompany the Chamber's CEO, Suzanne Clark, to the Munich Security Conference, where, of course, Ukraine's present and its future were top of mind for everyone attending the conference. It was a real privilege to hear President Zelensky's remarks at the conference and to hear as much dedication and commitment to ensuring that Ukraine wins this war. Since the beginning of the crisis, the Chamber and the Chamber Foundation have stood in solidarity with the people and the leaders of Ukraine, joining our own government and the private and NGO communities in offering a hand in ways only we uniquely can. Following Russia's invasion, the business community mobilized its expertise, capabilities, and resources to assist Ukraine. The U.S. Chamber Foundation's Corporate Citizenship Center quickly set up a tracker to capture and communicate the corporate response to the crisis. And the response has been extraordinary. More than $1 billion in corporate aid committed for Ukraine. The Chamber and the Foundation's position with respect to Ukraine has been clear. To quote our president from nearly a year ago, the Russian attacks on Ukraine and the Ukrainian people are a violation of the core tenets of international law and human rights. The U.S. Chamber and the American business community stand with the people of Ukraine. Unfortunately, as the invasion continues, humanitarian needs escalate. And to help us better understand what's happening on the ground, I'm pleased to introduce a good friend, Ukrainian Ambassador Oksana Markarova, who is Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. Before I turn the floor over to the ambassador, I want simply also to say that even as we continue to support Ukraine today, as the conflict continues, we are also thinking ahead towards Ukraine's victory and its eventual recovery and modernization. And to that end, the U.S. Chamber is standing up a Ukraine business initiative to sustain the work that has been undertaken thus far, and to ensure that American businesses are there to support Ukraine for the duration. With that, I'm happy to turn over the microphone to Ambassador Markarova.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start by thanking the Chamber and the Chamber Foundation for everything you've done. You've been such a great partner during this, during longer time, but especially during this very difficult year. And as we move to 1 year mark since the full-fledged phase of this war, after previous 8 years of all types of hybrid wars, and at the beginning in 2014, I would like to first thank again the Chamber and Foundation and all American businesses, members of the Chamber, for staying in Ukraine, paying taxes and paying salaries in Ukraine, supporting their personnel in Ukraine, but also for doing amazing support, everything for different humanitarian needs. The second, I would like also to start by thanking all the businesses that left Russia. It's very important because as, again, we see clearly that this war has to be won by not only Ukraine, but essentially all free world. And Russia has to be defeated for what they've done, for the brutal violation of all international law, of the UN Charter, attacking independent, peaceful country. Ukraine, as you know, never threatened Russia, never was even going to retake the territories Russia stole from us at the beginning of this war in 2014. We only used diplomatic solutions, but that unfortunately didn't help. So where we are now, 1 year since the full-fledged war started, you all have seen pictures of all kinds of war crimes and atrocities and unbelievable destruction of civilian residential infrastructure, energy infrastructure. More than 14 million of Ukrainians have to relocate from their places. Out of them, about 6 million outside of Ukraine, the rest relocated inside Ukraine. There are constant attacks from the air, sometimes more brutal, sometimes less. But in general, this is a humanitarian crisis that Europe did not see since the World War II. And essentially all Ukrainians are affected by it. So if you take any sector, from healthcare to energy, to schools, there are drastic effects everywhere. Now, we're very grateful to President Biden, to Congress on a strong bipartisan basis, to administration for a very timely help that has been provided to us, of course, in securities assistance, but today we're talking about humanitarian and the budget support that we have received from the United States. And I'm glad to have here a great partner and friend, Ambassador McKee, with us, because USAID is playing such a crucial role in providing this budget support, which is essential for being able to continue to pay salaries, being able to continue to sustain not only our efforts on the front lines, but also sustain the efforts inside the country, help Ukrainian business, help Ukrainian women, support children, provide all the necessary energy equipment in order to be able to restore water supply, sewage, or electricity in some of the areas. There's also big humanitarian support. But of course, with the destruction of this magnitude and of this scale, any support is not going to be enough. So as we are talking about how shall we finance the needs for this year, and of course there is the inaugural start of the inaugural meeting of the coordination platform for the financial support, supporting Ukraine, but also for the future reconstruction, we now focus in 3 main areas. First is how to sustain the effort and the budget support. Second is how to prepare for the reconstruction. And third is how to ensure that the humanitarian needs are also covered and covered in a very sustainable way. So for example, we are not calling our people refugees. We are calling all of them, including those who moved outside of Ukraine, a temporarily displaced people, because we know all of them would want to come back home. And we also, Ukraine would like them to come back home. That's why we need, even now, under the full-fledged war situation, think about rebuilding the infrastructure, rebuilding homes, providing jobs for these people. Now, by thanking to all the American businesses for the help, I'm asking you to stay the course with us and continue this help. And you can do just what you have been doing, or if you are looking for additional ways how to support, there are several ways how you can do it. First, you can support Ukraine directly. We do have a United 24 platform, which has an opportunity for American businesses to support either different reconstruction, infrastructure, demining, several projects there. It's a very transparent website with the very transparent reporting, and all the donations there go directly to the government accounts with the reporting from them. You can also support different projects supported by, organized by our First Lady Foundation, and it's primarily in the humanitarian sphere. We also are very grateful to those who support Ukraine House here in Washington, D.C., either Ukraine House or its specific projects. You know, we have project to provide help to children who lost their limbs, and we have a number of kids already in the U.S., especially difficult cases, getting their prostheses and returning back to life, or the demining efforts or other efforts. And of course, you know, there are a number of humanitarian organizations. I will not call all of them here, you know, but please use the embassy as a resource, reach us out, and we will definitely will be able to give you the information or get you in contact with all these organizations which either work here or directly in Ukraine. One thing that is very important to remember, and I think the remarkable visit of President Biden yesterday to Kyiv has shown it, and he has spoke about it today in Poland, that regardless of all the difficulties, Ukraine stands, and the government of Ukraine stands, and Ukrainian NGOs stand. And there are Ukrainians everywhere, despite, again, of the full-fledged war, there is the institutional capacity, and there are a lot of people in Ukraine who, with your help, would be able to do more. Now, of course, even though it's a humanitarian discussion today, and we're talking about the humanitarian crisis, I cannot but finish this with saying that one of the biggest humanitarian needs that we have right now is more weapons. And I know it sounds a bit strange, but the more weapons we will be able to receive, the faster we can get to just peace. And nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. So again, thank you very much for your support. Please do more, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your leadership and helping us understand the needs as they exist today and also potentially into the future. We remain committed to compassion and response to support this humanitarian situation. At the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, we want to ensure we're focused on the right problems to develop high-impact solutions to those in need. We're also joined today by a key partner in meeting some of these humanitarian needs by Ambassador Erin McKee. She is the U.S. Agency for International Development's Assistant Administrator for the Europe and Eurasia Bureau. Through USAID, the United States has mobilized a significant commitment to investing in both the short and long-term needs, and also assessing societal needs to alleviate the humanitarian impacts of this conflict. Ambassador McKee, we look forward to hearing your thoughts about private sector engagement in the humanitarian response and the recovery effort. Over to you.
Rob, thank you, Ambassador Makarova. Lovely to see you again. I'm very pleased to be here tonight to represent the Bureau for Europe and Eurasia at USAID and to draw attention to the many opportunities for the businesses and organizations that are participating in this conversation for partnership in Ukraine. According to the United Nations, nearly 500 private sector donors have provided support totaling $1.6 billion for the humanitarian response in Ukraine to date. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Corporate Citizenship Center has highlighted what so many of you have done, and I would like to thank the Chamber and all of you for stepping up when it matters most. The private sector is a critical partner to the United States Agency of International Development, or USAID's work around the world, but especially in Ukraine. Today and in the months and years to come, this partnership is going to become even more critical. The private sector's response to the humanitarian needs in Ukraine was quite generous, and it will work, but it will require continued help from you. Moreover, as we know, and as we are absolutely focused on, Ukraine will lead its own recovery and reconstruction, but it will require help and investment at a scale beyond any one government, any one donor, or even collectively between the United States, G7, plus the EU, the multilaterals. We're only scratching the surface of what Ukraine's needs will be as it realizes the future it so deserves. And so this is where the private sector comes in. It is also important to note that Ukraine has a really strong private sector, an amazingly skilled and educated workforce, and capable government systems, which, as Ambassador Makarova outlined, we've been working hard together to keep functioning so that Ukraine can not only win the war, but secure the peace. And so reconstruction and long-term recovery will look different here than in other crises and conflicts that we've seen around the world. With this needed surge of investment, the Ukrainian economy is ready to leapfrog forward. We want to get Ukraine quickly through the economic recovery phase and on a steady track for economic growth. And so this is one of the reasons that the United States government has decided to use the bulk of our additional development funding as budget support for the government of Ukraine. Long term, we know that these solutions will come through, and those solutions will be in partnership with the private sector. We have here at USAID established a team to engage with companies to channel private sector support. And this team here is engaging with US companies directly on several initiatives. USAID's Assist Ukraine team channels private sector offers to support Ukraine and Ukrainian refugees in many areas, including food security, workforce development, economic recovery and reconstruction, education, healthcare, among others. And the needs within Ukraine continue to evolve. Since the start of the war, USAID has remained nimble, pivoting our programming to meet needs on the ground and responding to the priorities of Ukrainian people. But we will need support from partners to meet all of those goals. Really quickly, I want to touch on what you may know better than we do ourselves, but the private sector engagement already in the humanitarian response space. The private sector has been a critical contributor. And while the United States is the largest single humanitarian donor to the Ukraine crisis, our humanitarian funding to date totals about 1.9 billion in Ukraine and the region. 1.6 billion of that is focused inside Ukraine. We have not done that alone, and it's been in partnership not only with our United Nations partners, big international NGOs, local NGOs, non-governmental organizations inside Ukraine. We have and continue to respond to those crises in need, but also at the same time, start laying the foundation for ultimate recovery and restoration and reconstruction. The outstanding generosity in that context, in addition to your tax dollars at work, is unmistakable from the private sector. As we approach the 1-year mark of the war, and with the recent launch of a $3.9 billion humanitarian appeal for Ukraine, which is aiming to reach over 11 million people in need this year, we urge the private sector to continue to join us in sustaining the support to the humanitarian response. One way to do so is to join our corporate call to action and make direct financial donations from your companies to help the people of Ukraine. Cash donations are the most efficient form of assistance. Unlike material donations, cash involves no transportation costs, shipping delays, or customs fees. It also enables relief organizations to spend more time providing aid by spending less time managing goods and commodities. And for more information on how you can help, please go to our Ukraine Corporate Call to Action website, where you will find information on how to donate. And there's also a link to our Center for International Disaster Information. It provides guidance on how relief organizations use the donations and what organizations you may donate to. Additionally, the United Nations has just updated its business guide specific to the Ukraine humanitarian crisis as a resource for the private sector. We will be sure to share those links and those resources with you. But I'd like to move off of the sort of humanitarian lens for just a moment. And while we, of course, continue to focus on Ukraine's immediate needs, I wanted to share with all of you really quickly what USAID is equally engaged in at the same time with helping Ukrainians achieve their vision for a democratic, independent, and European future. USAID's objective in supporting Ukraine's recovery can be summarized in what I call our 3 C's. The first is catalyze, and USAID will help catalyze Ukraine's growth as an independent, democratic, prosperous, and resilient country in line with Ukraine's aspirations. And the best way to do that, to foster that independence, is to move quickly through economic recovery and ultimately growth. At the same time, the second C is to consolidate. We want to help Ukraine consolidate the gains the country has made in partnership with the United States and other like-minded governments, and of course, most importantly, the private sector for the long haul. And then the third C is connect. And we will help connect Ukrainian citizens with each other, to their government, and to other countries in their region, to diverse markets and investors, and to partners who are committed to their success, not just for today, but for the brighter future that Ukrainians so deserve. So this is an opportunity when we talk about recovery for to lay the groundwork for a bold, inspiring new Ukraine. There's a major need for private capital to support the private sector to start or resume economic activity, and of course to finance new infrastructure. We realize that right now, while the war is going on, there is significant risk to investing in or financing these efforts. And we are looking at, we're in conversations right now at ways that the US government can assist in reducing that risk. We want to see US companies actively engaged in the reconstruction effort and creating commercial opportunities now, even before the conflict ends, in stable parts of the country. We've talked to several private sector partners interested in providing support, including pro bono support in several areas, such as workforce development activities, supporting reconstruction efforts, including providing engineering services, developing new infrastructure and water and heating, rebuilding of housing for internally displaced persons or temporarily displaced persons, as Ambassador Makarova said, as well as rebuilding critical services. Responding to challenges across the agricultural sector. As you know, Ukraine is, their role in supporting food security around the world was stymied with Putin's re-invasion, and we have been working very hard to ensure that Ukraine can continue to not only feed itself, but contribute to the world as we face an unprecedented global food insecurity. We'll also encourage folks to invest in independent media. It's a crucial element of a functioning democracy and has been hard hit by declining ad revenue. Companies with advertising resources in Europe may want to consider supporting Ukrainian independent media organizations. So as we move forward, I urge each of you to work with your teams and other private sector peers to think about, through your resources and expertise, what you can bring to the table to help address current gaps. I'd also encourage you to think about how you can build standing or ad hoc coalitions that enable you to more effectively leverage your resources and expertise to address current and ultimately recovery needs downrange. Ukrainians are fighting and paying a steep price to secure a better future, one that places it among a European and broader community of shared values for the right to dignity, democracy, and free and open society with a thriving economy. We look forward to working with all of you as we support Ukraine in securing that future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador McKee, and also Ambassador Markarova, for your time and your reflections. We do have a few minutes remaining for some dialogue, and there are a few questions in the chat. So for the audience, just please post your questions in the Zoom chat tool, and we'll do our best to address them in order or try to get them into some sort of coherent fashion. So the teamers will cue the questions for me, and then I'll ask the questions. We do have one, and it's very timely because it relates to events over the last week or so. So the statements coming out of the Munich Security Conference, it just really seems undeniable that there's consensus for support for Ukraine in the second year of this fight. What does 2023 really look like from the private sector standpoint, and where can the private sector help maybe reduce some of the ambiguity during the conflict? I go to Ambassador Markarova first, maybe, and then Ambassador McKee second, because I think particularly USAID outlined a number of different lines of effort to not only solve some of the humanitarian challenges, but also could start to do some reconstruction work while the conflict continues.
Well, let me quickly start. what can business do this year? First of all, it's very important to realize that the rapid recovery, as we call it, or the initial reconstruction is happening already. And whatever businesses can do to work with, to expand their practices in Ukraine, to order more. I mean, we do have a lot of Ukrainian IT firms and designers and architects and who are looking for contracts outside. And this would be one of a great ways to support Ukrainian business by also getting high quality services so that people can stay in Ukraine, but still generate revenues, which are so needed for Ukraine right now. So again, please use the embassy as a resource. We would be more than happy to put you in contact with these Ukrainian businesses that are actively working and expanding. Also, we have started already working with MIGA, and hopefully DFC and also Japanese agency JICA will join soon in issuing the war insurances, which are essential for businesses that are willing to expand and work in Ukraine to actually start doing it now. So as soon as from the pilot project, which MIGA already did, we'll move to a more standard product. Please keep your focus on Ukraine now. Third is, Ukraine can be, and we always kept saying it, after we win, we can be a solution to so many global problems. Food security, energy security. We do have a long list of rare earth materials in Ukraine, from, lithium to so many others, which have not been largely explored or developed in Ukraine. Now, of course, it's very difficult to do it under the current circumstances, but you can do all the preparatory work. So again, we would be more than happy to put you in contact with everyone in Ukraine to get the information to you, to start discussing it with the government, because on all these large projects, it takes time, the feasibility studies. And there are a number of companies that are doing it already. For example, Westinghouse is moving ahead with the large new projects, which will be realized in years, but there is a planning and engineering and other work that has been done at the moment. So, would be happy to do that together with you. So again, it's working with us now on the future reconstruction, but there is a lot that we could do now. And with the deregulation, with the direct participation of Ukrainian Cabinet of Ministers and the government, I think we can offer a unique opportunity to do something exciting and different in Ukraine, to do something that you have in your plans, but it's very difficult to do in a strictly regulated environment, where we need now everything. So for example, we were able to, when we needed Starlink to start working in Ukraine, we have been able to go through the path that usually takes 9 to 12 months in any country to actually give all the licenses and frequencies and do all the work. We've done it in a matter of days, literally. And we are ready to do it in other industries as well. So there are a lot of opportunities in business development, which at this point in time is a humanitarian need for us, because it will help us to keep people in Ukraine, create jobs in Ukraine, even get some people back, because now people are interested to go back. So we are your partner, again, on some of the very important initiatives, like, for example, business initiatives. We are partnering with USAID and with other partners in US government, creating this public-private partnerships, creating programs where, you can do well while doing good. So reach out to us, and whatever business ideas you might have, we would be able to find not only good partners in Ukraine, but also additional resources and partners, and maybe some humanitarian partners who would be able to do it together. And clearly, you have a saying in the US that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village now to do what we need to do in Ukraine, and we invite everyone to be a resident of that village and do it together with us.
Thanks for that. And that brought to mind a question that is actually in the chat. And Ambassador McKee, saw that you're coming off camera, but it was really related to what do businesses really need to know as they engage in these partnerships? So certainly there probably been some lessons learned over the last year on partnering either private sector to nonprofit or private sector to government. Any best practices or things, even things to avoid based upon the activities over the last year?
I would say, and as Ambassador Makarova said, we're in conversations with both MIGA as well as the Development Finance Corporation and others about mitigating risk, right? I mean, there's two things out there that we've heard in contact with our private sector partners, many of whom I'm pleased to say have joined in the agriculture sector, and we're going to launch an initiative in the energy sector as well, because you know, the time to start looking at recovery and restoration and critical inputs and investment is not when the conflict's over, but now. And but I understand everybody's got a bottom line or shareholders, and they, you know, how do we mitigate that risk? And so this is something that's a top priority for us that we hope, that we hope that we'll be able to get to soon. So I would say it's not a mistake. It's that we need to continue the conversation about what resources and tools are available that incentivize or provide that risk mitigation for broader private sector participation and investment. That is key. And, you know, I can vouch 100%. I was in Kyiv in October and hopefully going back again soon. Ukraine is open for business. And it's vital. It's a humanitarian need to create, you know, start generating revenue and getting Ukrainians back to work, and getting Ukrainians who've been displaced home. And there is no greater restoration of dignity than having a livelihood and being able to put food on your own table, right? And so this is a top priority for our partners, our government of Ukraine partners, and the Ukrainian people on the ground. And so I would say the lesson learned, Rob, that to the broader community is we need to get creative and see what we can do to ensure that those investments and partnerships are as, you know, protected as possible, but not wait around for everything to be perfect, because who knows how long it's going to go on, and the needs are today.
Thank you. And one of the other questions that we had in the chat as well was really for those businesses that have, excuse me, have not been displaced. How have you seen, either from a USAID standpoint or from the Ukraine standpoint, how do they manage that, and, you know, the morale and the stress of running a business in that environment? Being a business owner is inherently stressful, but then you add all of those conditions on top of it. It's really remarkable to see that kind of resilience play out. We got a question really related to, for those that have been left behind, you know, how are they, you know, how is their morale? How does Main Street really look like in some of these areas that are able to continue to stay in business despite the conditions?
Oh, go ahead, Oksana. I can just go really quickly that it's at times surreal. Outside of the sort of the air raid sirens, you can, when I was in Kyiv just a couple months ago, it was people were eating in cafes and businesses were operating. I know that one of our key partners inside Ukraine had to relocate some of their clients from the line of control away from the fighting, but they didn't want to leave Ukraine. They wanted to stay in Ukraine and continue to put folks to work and continue to obviously do everything they can to both stay in business, but also they knew that staying in business helped the cause. And so I would say, you know, the resilience that we see on and the courage of the Ukrainian people is not just the frontline soldiers or the first responders, it's every single Ukrainian and those that are staying in business. It's going to be hard to sustain that morale, but they've been extremely innovative, and we've provided all of the support that we can. One of the immediate responses, particularly given the macroeconomic situation and liquidity challenges, was access to credit and finance. And so that's an area that we moved into quickly so that businesses for that gap could stay open, stay in business, and keep employing until such time as they were able to either restart, retool, and or just buy themselves some time. And so that's been an important interim solution, and one that we recognized right away. So bottom line, morale is something, it's breathtaking actually how dedicated, committed, and passionate Ukrainians are about their country.
Just to add to that, we all Ukrainians know that there is no other choice for us. There's only one choice to win, and there is only one country, which is home. So regardless of how difficult it is, all of us will do everything possible, and sometimes impossible, as I say, in order to live our lives. So people will continue to bake bread, people will continue to clean the streets, people will continue trying to do whatever their business is doing, producing, putting kids into schools, even though it's in the bomb shelters and sometimes online. And I've been to Ukraine 3 times since the beginning of this full-fledged phase of the war. Every time it was different. Last April, it was very difficult because it was just weeks after Bucha has been liberated. That's where my home is, to the north of Bucha. And you saw the destruction, you saw the losses. It was really difficult. Then when I was in September, it was remarkable to see how much of that has been already, if not repaired, but cleaned, and people are ready to do a lot by themselves. But we need all the tools and equipment, and we need the repairs parts and windows, which again, something that you never store enough in that massive numbers, but also because it has been destroyed in so many places. When I was there last December, it was even more difficult because of the attacks on the electricity and power grid, and it was cold also. But again, in all these different phases, people are resolved, and people know that we have to win. So it could be more difficult or less difficult, but I talked to a number of Ukrainian American companies, because for us all of them are Ukrainian. Even if it's American company, if they work in Ukraine, they are Ukrainian. So we spoke with the team of Boeing, for example, and they have expanded their office during this year. They have expanded their R&D center in Ukraine. I spoke with Cargill recently, and they all are discussing how to do the planting season better, how to help the farmers they're working with. So, it's we will win. I have no question in my mind, and talking to the companies in Ukraine gives me assurances and sometimes even guarantees that we can do it. But of course, if we join forces with more companies, if more American companies will put Ukraine on their map of the future activities, if they will start thinking how we can include Ukraine in our supply chains in the future, that will enable us to do it faster.
There have been a couple of questions in the chat, and they hit on some of the items that both of you just talked about. One is on supply chain, and the experiences of 2022 and the challenge for the food supply chain and the impact to grain exports was significant, but grain's now flowing to Africa and other locations that need it. Can you give us some insight as to how that kind of public-private partnership is helping improve the conditions for the food supply chain and agribusiness in 2023?
Well, first of all, the grain deal is working, and we're thankful to the partners who made it possible. But of course, there is much more there we can do. And unfortunately, Russia is stalling and trying to delay the passage of the ships. We can send much more. So first, we are focusing now on prolonging that deal. And second, I mean, again, as I said, even before this full-fledged war, Ukraine has been in the top 5 exporters of so many products. And by blocking the Black Sea first, and then now trying not to adhere to the grain deal conditions all the time, Russia is really creating food crisis for so many countries. And Ukraine is very devoted. You have seen that with the help, for example, from many countries, including the US, and I'm very glad that US participated in this wonderful, I think, project that we have together, which is called Grain from Ukraine, where we're ready to donate a lot of grain. And together with partners who are paying for the shipment, we're sending it to and donating it to some of the countries on the African continent and in other places. The productivity gains that could be in Ukraine in agriculture is several folds. You know, this is where we can increase the production. Again, it will require the demining, it will require hopefully the stop of the war, you know, and winning the war. But even under these circumstances, our farmers are ready to grow more. And that whole subsectors in that industry, you know, the storage facilities, elevators, port infrastructure in other ports that we didn't use before, but because we're looking for all kinds of alternative routes going through Europe. Thus, you know, railroad infrastructure, roads and everything else. It's all becoming very important. And I think it's important message to say that it's Russia and Russia only that has created shortages of food or the disruption of the supply chain. It's Ukraine together with the US and other partners that is working hard, even under attack, to essentially send out, you know, the grain and barley and sunflower oil and everything that we produce to be exported, and we can do much more. And, you know, we are looking for any companies that are willing to participate in this future projects. Our European integration, which we didn't yet touch today, but you know, we are candidate to the European Union now, and one of the very important parts of the European integration is actually, you know, improving our infrastructure from Ukraine to the west of us and tap into some of the port infrastructure that we didn't use before. So together with increased help and assistance in air defense systems, you know, even now during this very difficult time, Ukrainian railroad company is rebuilding and reconstructing and building even some new lines into Europe. So logistically, it's a challenge, but you know, it's also a lot of opportunities. So I don't want to sound rosy, but I think for companies that would like to work with us, and we're ready to sit down with not only USAID, but also the Department of Commerce. They are very active, and the whole team is working actively with us on what we can do in addition to the wartime insurances, but what we can do actually to help businesses to put it on their map now.
We only have a few more minutes and we have maybe more questions than minutes allotted. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions very quickly. And one is probably maybe best addressed by both of you. And it's all about supply chain and logistics, because in order for not only humanitarian aid to get through, but also the reconstruction materials, what does the supply chain look like from a capacity to deliver, and are there opportunities there from a supply standpoint?
We deliver HIMARSs from the western border to everywhere on the front lines. So even under these difficult circumstances, we are capable of delivering everything else. But again, Ukraine has a very developed system of roads and railroad, and of course the air connection is not something we can use at the moment because there is no fly regime everywhere in Ukraine because of the rockets. and the Shahid drones and everything. So it is a risky environment, but at the same time, I think the majority of our companies from the energy infrastructure, the Ukrenergo, which is the power grid company, the railroad company, the Ukrainian postal office, have adapted, if we can adapt, of course, to war, but have adapted to these new conditions and really are working closely with businesses in order to tailor to the new needs. So it's difficult, but we are doing it, and you know, it's we're trying to improve the supply chain. So, for example, you know, some of the ports on the Danube River, which were never used as the main ports to deliver the agricultural products, but we are developing, we're building or reconstructing the roads, we're reconstructing some of the facilities so that we can divert some of the products from the ports of Odessa or others which are more limited right now, or from some of the ports which we cannot use, unfortunately. Similar with the cross borders between us and Poland, us and other countries, we're working really close with our partners to make sure that there are no delays on the borders, to create even additional checkpoints, to create separate lines for the trucks that are delivering goods. So again, would be happy to share more information with companies that are interested. Let us know, contact us directly, or put you in contact with the Ukrainian companies or on the other side, or with the regulators and the relative ministries.
Really, Rob, really quickly, just to illustrate that point, we've seen, you know, the unity of response across the board, particularly from our EU colleagues. And as we described, the solidarity lanes, which were the land and river routes that opened up when Putin blockaded, frankly, the major ports and trying to get out the grain, that all of the logistics and adaptation to be able to ensure that throughput obviously goes both ways, right? It's not just getting the grain and the agricultural commodities out, but it's also getting humanitarian supplies and other needed inputs, at least for the agriculture sector and other sectors in. And recently, just to give you an anecdote about partnership and action, we purchased an 18 megawatt generator, which is gas-fired generator, which is enough to power or light 100,000 homes. It's a big piece of equipment, and we could not commercially figure out how to get it out from Arizona to Ukraine. So our Ukrainian colleagues basically sent 2 Antonovs down to Arizona, loaded them up, and got them to the border in Poland, at which point they were trucked across. So it's, and that was just last week or about 2 weeks ago. So it's possible, even again, the partnership piece and sort of portal to portal and end to end, it may take a wee bit longer, but we've worked out a lot of the kinks, and there are multiple routes open, and recognition that the logistics around getting stuff, whatever it might be, in and out of Ukraine has been at the center, obviously, of both the response, but as we look ahead to the long haul.
That's great to hear. And with that, I think we have more questions that we have time. So I'll just ask this final question, and that is, where can companies really plug in to be of greatest impact? And how best can companies and nonprofits, you know, what do they need to hear from you to sustain that level of support that we heard about over the weekend in Munich and elsewhere, as we're looking to the commemoration of the 24th?
Well, I will just maybe quickly repeat that if you go to the embassy website, there are a number of places where you can help Ukraine through, you know, from United 24 to other activities. Also, we invite everyone to join our activities here in Washington and everywhere in the US. So we will have the rally, for example, on the 25th. Would be happy to see everyone near the Lincoln Memorial. And there will be events everywhere in the US. Also, please, for all the American companies and non-for-profits and others, do not forget, in addition to all the humanitarian support for which we are grateful, but please continue writing to your congressmen, to your senators, and make your support to the cause known, because it's very important. I mean, people who do support, they rarely just try to say, oh, I still support, this is still important. Whereas people who have different agendas, they might be in a minority, but they're very vocal. So the voice in the public support, telling publicly about what you are doing is very important, because it also shares the information with others and unites the support. We need to stay the course. It has been a year, very difficult year, and we don't know when it's going to be over. But as President Biden and everyone in the administration keeps saying that US is with us as long as it takes, and we have to be able also to do it as long as it takes to win. But in order to do it, in order to stay the course, as military people say, we have to constantly keep the support. And I think American business can play a crucial role in it. So whatever you can do, from your own activities to your planning your new expanding activities in Ukraine, exploring it, humanitarian support, supporting Ukrainians here, or simply making your position known publicly, everything will help, and we will be grateful for everything.
Well, Ambassador McKee, did you have any final words?
I was just going to say, she stole my recommendation, which was, please tell your congressman and senator that the fight in Ukraine matters, and it's not just about winning the war, but about securing the peace. And that from a bottom line perspective, if Ukraine's success, victory, and future is important, not just to Ukraine, not just to Europe, but to the entire world.
Well, thanks both of you, but especially Ambassador Markarova. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your tenacity and that of your people. We've heard on this call that the loss of life and disruption to the way of life in the region is significant. The outlook is challenging, but it is not insurmountable. The business community is well positioned to assist now and after hostilities cease. Hopefully this discussion today sparks renewed commitment to helping the people of Ukraine and promoting democracy for the future. Our resource page at the Chamber Foundation and the aid tracker for this crisis are updated. Please contact us if you're taking action, and if we can help tell your story or how we can potentially connect you with some of the resources that were mentioned in this discussion today. Also, before we close, I do want to thank the companies that have made this call possible through the support of the Chamber Foundation's Disaster Response and Community Resilience Program. They are prominently listed on our website, and we could not do this without their support. For any other questions on how you can get involved or future support or programming in this space, please reach out to our team at resilience@uschamber.com. Thanks again to our ambassadors for your time, also to all of you for participating today, and we wish you well. Thank you.